It was Christmas Eve, and the city was glowing with lights. Houses were decorated with shining stars, colorful bulbs, and wreaths on the doors. Families walked happily on the streets, children held their parents' hands, and the sound of laughter filled the air. But far away from all the noise and cheer, inside a grand mansion, sat a man who had everything that money could buy, yet he felt alone. His name was Daniel, a successful millionaire, but he was also a single father raising his little daughter, Emily. Daniel had lost his wife a few years earlier, and since then, Christmas had never felt the same. He still remembered how she used to bake cookies, play soft music, and decorate the tree with Emily. Now, although the mansion looked beautiful with a tall Christmas tree covered in gold ornaments and piles of gifts around it, there was an emptiness that no light could fill. He had ordered expensive presents, booked a chef to cook a feast, and even arranged a snowfall machine for his daughter, but deep down, he felt that something important was missing. That night, after tucking Emily into bed, Daniel stood by the window, watching the snow fall gently on the streets outside. He thought about his journey, how he worked day and night to build his company, how people respected him, how he could buy almost anything he wanted. But none of those things replaced the warmth of a family. His daughter was his only joy, and he tried his best to give her everything. Still, he often wondered if she missed her mother as much as he did. Feeling restless, Daniel decided to go for a drive. He put on his coat, stepped into his luxury car, and drove into the city. The streets were filled with life, people carrying last-minute gifts, restaurants crowded with families enjoying dinner, carol singers performing near the church. Everywhere he looked, people had someone by their side. Daniel, on the other hand, drove alone, his heart heavy. He thought about Emily sleeping at home and how he wanted her to have memories of joy, not loneliness, during Christmas. As he drove further into the city, he passed through a quieter area near a small grocery store. It was less decorated than the other parts of town. The street lights flickered, and the shops were closing early for the holiday. That was when he noticed something unusual. Near the trash bins outside the store, a woman bent down, digging through garbage bags. Her clothes were old and torn, her hair messy, and her hands shook in the cold. She looked thin, fragile, and tired, as if she hadn't eaten properly in days. Daniel slowed his car, his eyes fixed on her. At first, he thought maybe she was searching for something she lost, but then he realized the truth: she was looking for food. The sight shook him. While he had a house filled with more than enough, this woman was struggling just to survive the night. Something inside him whispered that he couldn't just drive away. He parked his car near the store and stepped out, the cold wind brushing against his face. The woman noticed him and quickly looked down, embarrassed to be seen. She tried to move away from the trash, but Daniel gently approached her. "Excuse me," he said softly, "are you okay?" Her eyes lifted for a moment, and he saw a mix of fear and pride in them. "I'm fine," she muttered quickly, though her trembling hands told another story. Daniel hesitated. He didn't want to scare her or make her feel ashamed. "It's Christmas Eve," he continued kindly. "You shouldn't be out here in the cold. Do you need help?" For a moment, silence hung between them. The woman hugged her thin coat around herself and shook her head. "I don't want charity," she said, her voice weak but firm. "I used to have everything too. A home, a family, even a good job. But life can change so fast." Her words hit Daniel deeply. He realized she wasn't just someone begging for help, she was someone who had fallen, someone who once had a story, a life, and dignity. He thought about his own struggles after losing his wife, how close he sometimes felt to breaking. He imagined what could have happened if he didn't have the wealth or support system he had now. Maybe he could have been in her place. Daniel took a deep breath and said, "I understand. Life can be cruel sometimes. But that doesn't mean you should suffer alone." The woman looked at him again, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She didn't reply, but the way her lips trembled showed that she wanted to believe his words. Daniel glanced at the cafe across the street. The lights were still on, and the smell of fresh coffee and bread drifted out. "Come with me," he said gently. "Let me buy you something warm to eat. Nothing more, just a meal. No strings attached." At first, she shook her head, but the rumble of her stomach betrayed her. Slowly, she nodded. Together, they walked into the cafe, and the warmth of the heater surrounded them. The woman sat quietly at the corner table while Daniel ordered soup, bread, and hot chocolate. When the food arrived, she hesitated before taking a spoonful, as if it had been so long since someone treated her kindly that she didn't know how to react. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she whispered, "Thank you." Daniel watched her eat, and for the first time that night, he felt a strange sense of peace. Christmas wasn't about lights, gifts, or expensive dinners. It was about compassion, about seeing another human being and choosing to care. As they sat there in silence, the cafe filled with soft music and laughter from families. Yet, for Daniel, this moment felt more meaningful than any grand party. He had stepped out of his loneliness, and in front of him was someone who needed to be seen, heard, and valued. Driving into the city, he had thought he was just escaping his own emptiness. But now he realized fate had brought him here, to meet this woman. He didn't know her full story yet, but he knew one thing: this Christmas Eve was about to change his life, and perhaps hers too. Daniel sat across from the woman in the warm cafe. The snow outside painted the glass windows white, but inside there was the smell of bread, the sound of soft music, and a little comfort that had been missing from both their lives. She held the spoon in her shaking hand, sipping the hot soup slowly, as though she hadn't tasted warmth in years. He didn't want to rush her, so he just watched, giving her space. For the first time that evening, Daniel felt like the loneliness in his heart was softening. The woman glanced up at him nervously, unsure of why the stranger was being so kind. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. Her voice was low, as if she was afraid to disturb anyone else around. Daniel thought for a moment. He could have said it was Christmas. He could have said he had extra money to spare. But instead, he spoke from his heart. "Because no one deserves to be alone on a night like this," he said. "And because I know what it feels like to lose something precious." The woman lowered her spoon, staring at him with tired eyes. "You don't know what it's like to lose everything," she whispered, almost defensively. Daniel leaned forward, his expression gentle. "Maybe not in the same way as you," he admitted, "but I lost my wife years ago. I'm raising my daughter alone. On nights like this, even with all the lights and the gifts, the house feels empty." For a moment, silence fell between them. The woman blinked back tears, and Daniel could tell that his honesty touched her. She wiped her face with the corner of her sleeve and took a shaky breath. I had a daughter too," she finally said, her voice breaking. "She passed away when she was only 8. After that, I lost myself. My husband left, I couldn't work properly, and bills kept coming. Before I realized it, I had nothing left. No house, no family, no job." Daniel felt his chest tighten. He hadn't expected such a painful confession, and he didn't know what to say at first. But he looked at her with compassion, not pity. "I'm so sorry," he said softly. "No parent should have to go through that." The woman nodded. "It changes you forever," she whispered. Her hands trembled as she held the cup of hot chocolate, as if drawing strength from its warmth. "Some nights I sleep under the bridge, other nights at the shelter if there's space. I never thought my life would end up like this. I used to wear nice clothes, go to work every morning, laugh with my co-workers, and now people don't even want to look me in the eye." Daniel listened carefully. Every word she spoke carried pain, but also dignity. She wasn't asking for money. She wasn't begging. She was simply telling her truth. And that truth hit Daniel harder than he expected. He realized how close anyone could come to losing it all. One tragedy, one wrong turn, and life could collapse like a fragile house of cards. When she finished, Daniel took a deep breath. "What's your name?" he asked gently. She hesitated for a moment before answering. "Sarah," she said. "My name is Sarah." "Sarah," Daniel repeated softly. "It's nice to meet you." "My name is Daniel." He paused, then added, "And I have a daughter named Emily. She's sleeping at home right now, waiting for Christmas morning." The mention of his daughter brought a small, bittersweet smile to Sarah's face. "She's lucky to have you," she said. "At least she still has a parent who cares." Daniel's eyes softened. "And she'll be luckier if I can show her what kindness really means," he replied. Sarah looked down at her cup, trying to hide the emotion in her eyes. She was not used to kindness anymore. For so long, people had walked past her, ignoring her existence, treating her like she was invisible. But tonight, a stranger sat with her, listened to her, and reminded her that she was still human. The cafe slowly emptied as the night grew colder. Outside, the snow piled higher, and the streets grew quiet. Daniel noticed Sarah rubbing her hands together, her thin coat no match for the freezing air she would soon face. He thought about her words about her daughter, about losing everything, about being invisible, and he felt a responsibility tugging at him. "Sarah," he said softly, "you can't go back outside tonight. It's too cold." She shook her head quickly. "I'll be fine. I've survived worse nights." "No," Daniel said firmly but kindly. "You shouldn't have to survive nights like this. Not on Christmas Eve." She looked at him in confusion. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, knowing this was a big step. Then he said, "Come with me. At least for tonight. You don't have to stay forever, but you shouldn't be out here freezing when there's food and warmth in my home." Sarah's eyes widened. She almost laughed in disbelief. You'd invite me? A stranger? Someone you found in the trash?" Daniel nodded. "Because I don't see you as someone digging through trash. I see you as a mother who once loved her daughter, as a woman who had dreams, and as a person who still matters." Her lips trembled, and for the first time in years, she felt tears of gratitude instead of shame. She wanted to argue, to say she didn't deserve such kindness, but deep inside, her heart longed for a moment of dignity, for a moment of safety. Finally, she whispered, "Are you sure?" Daniel smiled warmly. "I'm sure." As they stepped out of the cafe, the icy wind cut through the night, but Sarah felt something different this time. She wasn't alone. She walked beside Daniel, and though she still carried the weight of her past, she also carried a flicker of hope. The drive to his mansion was quiet. Sarah stared out the window, watching the decorated houses pass by. Families were gathered inside, children laughed near the Christmas tree, and the glow of warmth shone through every window. She hadn't seen this kind of life in years. Her throat tightened, but she didn't cry. Not this time. She was too stunned that she was being taken somewhere safe. When they arrived, Sarah froze at the sight of Daniel's home. The mansion stood tall and glowing with golden lights, the Christmas tree shining through the glass windows. She whispered, "This can't be real." Daniel opened the car door for her and smiled. "It's just a home. But tonight, it's also your home." Sarah stepped inside, her heart racing. The warmth of the fireplace, the smell of pine from the Christmas tree, and the sound of holiday music playing softly welcomed her. She stood silently, afraid to touch anything, afraid she would wake up from this dream. But Daniel simply guided her to the table and poured her another cup of hot chocolate. "You're safe here," he said gently. For the first time in years, Sarah felt human again. She felt seen. And as she sat in Daniel's home, she realized something she thought she had forgotten, that miracles could still happen, even for someone like her, even on a night when all she had expected was cold and hunger. Sarah sat quietly in the grand living room, her hands wrapped around the warm cup of hot chocolate Daniel had given her. The fire in the fireplace cracked softly, spreading a golden glow across the room. The tall Christmas tree sparkled with ornaments and lights, and the faint scent of pine filled the air. She couldn't believe where she was. Just a few hours ago, she was out in the freezing cold, digging through trash for something to eat. And now, she was sitting inside a beautiful mansion, safe and warm. It all felt like a dream that she didn't dare trust. Daniel watched her carefully, not wanting her to feel uncomfortable. He noticed how her eyes moved around the room, almost as if she was afraid to touch or even breathe too loudly. "You don't need to be nervous," he said gently. "This is just a house. What matters is the people in it." Sarah smiled faintly, though her heart still raced. "It's more than a house," she whispered. "It feels like another world compared to where I came from." At that moment, the sound of soft footsteps echoed on the staircase. A small girl in pink pajamas appeared, rubbing her sleepy eyes. Emily, Daniel's daughter, had woken up and was curious about the new guest. She looked at her father, then at the woman sitting on the couch. "Daddy, who's that?" she asked in her small, innocent voice. Daniel smiled and motioned for Emily to come closer. "This is Sarah," he explained softly. "She's our guest tonight." Emily tilted her head, studying Sarah with her big eyes. Instead of fear or suspicion, she smiled brightly and ran to the table. Picking up a gingerbread cookie from the plate, she walked over and offered it to Sarah. "Merry Christmas," Emily said cheerfully. Sarah froze, her heart overwhelmed by the simple kindness of a child. Her eyes filled with tears as she accepted the cookie with trembling hands. "Thank you, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice breaking. She hadn't been called into a warm moment like this for so long that she almost forgot what it felt like. Daniel watched the scene quietly, his heart swelling with pride. Emily had always been kind and gentle, traits she had inherited from her late mother. Seeing her connect so naturally with Sarah reassured him that he had done the right thing bringing her here. Emily climbed onto the couch beside Sarah, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "Do you like Christmas?" she asked. Sarah smiled softly. "I used to love Christmas," she admitted. "I used to bake cookies, decorate the tree, and sing songs with my daughter. But then, life changed, and I stopped celebrating." Emily's smile softened, and she leaned against her father. "Then you can celebrate with us," she said simply. The words touched Sarah so deeply that she had to look away to stop herself from crying again. It wasn't just the warm drink, or the safety of the house, it was the feeling of being welcomed, of being treated as part of something again. The three of them sat together near the fireplace. Daniel asked Sarah to share more about her life, not to judge her, but to listen. Slowly, she opened up. She told them how she once worked as a secretary in a law office, how she loved reading books to her little daughter every night, how she believed her life was secure. Then she shared how her daughter's sudden illness turned everything upside down. The hospital bills drained her savings, her husband walked away because he couldn't handle the grief, and soon after, she lost her job. One by one, her world fell apart. As she spoke, her voice cracked, but there was no bitterness in her tone, only sadness. Emily, though young, seemed to understand the heaviness in Sarah's story. She reached out and gently held Sarah's hand. Sarah looked down at the small fingers holding hers, and it felt like a piece of her broken heart was being stitched back together. Daniel listened closely, his heart heavy with respect for the woman sitting before him. He realized she wasn't weak. She wasn't lazy. She wasn't less. She was someone who had been through unimaginable loss and was still standing, even if her steps had led her to the cold streets. He admired her honesty and the strength it took to keep going, even in pain. After she finished her story, Daniel shared his own. He told her about his wife, how losing her changed him, and how being a single father was both the hardest and most meaningful part of his life. He admitted that sometimes, even with all his wealth, he felt empty because money couldn't buy back love or fill the silence in the house. Sarah nodded as she listened. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel invisible. She didn't feel judged. She felt seen, understood. And in that shared understanding of loss, a quiet bond began to form between them. The clock struck midnight, and soft Christmas chimes played from the clock on the wall. Daniel stood and said, "It's officially Christmas. Let's make it count." He walked over to the tree, picked up a small box wrapped in golden paper, and handed it to Emily. Emily opened it with excitement and found a small bracelet with her name engraved on it. Her eyes sparkled with joy, and she hugged her father tightly. Then she surprised him by turning and offering the bracelet to Sarah. "You can wear it tonight," Emily said. "So you don't feel alone." Sarah's eyes filled again, and she gently accepted the gift. I I don't deserve this," she whispered. Daniel shook his head softly. "Sarah, everyone deserves kindness. Especially at Christmas." That night, instead of sleeping under a bridge or in the cold, Sarah slept in a warm guest room, covered with a soft blanket. Before closing her eyes, she whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude, not for the mansion or the food, but for the kindness of a father and his little girl who had reminded her that she was still worthy of love. Meanwhile, Daniel lay in his own room, thinking about how the night had unfolded. He had set out for a drive because he felt lonely, but instead, he had found someone whose story touched him deeply. He realized that Christmas wasn't about the perfect gifts or the grand celebrations, it was about moments like this, about opening your heart to others. And Emily, in her innocence, had shown them both the purest truth: sometimes, family isn't only about blood. Sometimes, it's about kindness, about welcoming someone in when they need it most. By the time morning came, the three of them would wake up not as strangers, but as people connected by compassion, carrying memories that would last far longer than the night. The sun rose slowly on Christmas morning, filling the mansion with soft golden light. Emily's laughter echoed down the hallway as she ran toward the living room, eager to open her presents. The Christmas tree sparkled even brighter than the night before, and the aroma of hot chocolate and cinnamon filled the air. For Daniel, mornings like this were usually bittersweet. He loved seeing his daughter's joy but always felt the absence of his wife. But today was different. Today, there was someone new in the house, someone who had brought an unexpected warmth into their lives. Sarah stepped carefully into the living room. She had slept in a warm bed for the first time in years, and even though it felt strange, she was deeply grateful. She wore a robe that Emily had found in the guest room closet and had insisted she use. Her hair was still messy, and her face showed the tired lines of her struggles, but her eyes looked softer, less heavy. She paused at the sight of Emily sitting by the tree with excitement written all over her face. "Come sit with us," Daniel said kindly, gesturing to the couch. Sarah hesitated. "I shouldn't intrude on your family's Christmas," she whispered. Emily shook her head quickly. "You're not intruding. You're part of our Christmas now." She rushed over and pulled Sarah's hand, guiding her to sit beside her. Sarah's heart swelled at the child's simple acceptance, something she hadn't felt in so long. One by one, Emily opened her presents. Dolls, books, puzzles, and a pair of sparkly shoes made her eyes shine. She showed each gift proudly to Sarah, who clapped and smiled as though she were watching her own child. For Sarah, it stirred old memories of the Christmas mornings she once shared with her daughter. The ache of loss was still there, but mixed with it was a tender joy she thought she would never feel again. Daniel noticed the way Sarah's eyes glistened when she watched Emily. He knew she was remembering her past, and he felt a tug at his heart. He wanted her to feel not just like a guest, but like someone who belonged. After Emily had opened the last present, Daniel stood and went to the tree. He picked up a small box wrapped in silver paper. "This one's not for Emily," he said softly. "It's for Sarah." Sarah's eyes widened. She shook her head. "No, please. I can't accept gifts. You've already done too much." Daniel smiled gently. "It's not charity. It's a Christmas gift, from one friend to another." Emily clapped her hands in excitement. "Open it, Sarah. Please." With trembling hands, Sarah unwrapped the box. Inside was a delicate scarf made of soft wool, in a gentle shade of blue. It wasn't extravagant, but it was warm and beautiful. Sarah held it against her cheek, overwhelmed. "It's perfect," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "I can't remember the last time someone gave me a gift." Daniel's voice was calm and full of kindness. "Then let this be the first of many. You deserve to be remembered, Sarah. You deserve to feel special." Sarah pressed the scarf to her chest, unable to stop the tears from falling. Emily quickly hugged her, and Sarah held the little girl tightly, feeling the warmth of human connection. After breakfast, the three of them sat near the fireplace. Emily played with her dolls, occasionally showing Sarah how to dress them or brush their hair. Daniel sipped his coffee, quietly watching the scene unfold. For the first time in years, he felt his house was alive again, not just filled with things, but filled with laughter, warmth, and a sense of family. But outside the walls of the mansion, the world was still the same. Not everyone would understand what Daniel had done. When word spread to his neighbors and friends that a homeless woman had been brought into his home, there were whispers. People wondered why a millionaire would take such a risk. Some said he was being foolish, others claimed he was trying to prove something. But Daniel didn't care. He knew in his heart that kindness didn't need approval. Later that afternoon, Daniel suggested they all go for a walk in the snowy garden behind the house. Emily ran ahead, making snow angels and laughing, her joy echoing across the yard. Sarah walked slowly, the blue scarf wrapped warmly around her neck. She looked around at the tall trees, the frozen fountain, the clear blue sky, and she felt something she hadn't felt in years: hope. Daniel walked beside her. "I know it must feel strange, being here," he said. Sarah nodded. "Strange, yes. But also, healing. For so long I felt invisible. But last night and today, I felt like a person again. I can't thank you enough." Daniel looked at her seriously. "You don't have to thank me. Sometimes, helping others helps us too. I've been carrying my own loneliness for years. Maybe we needed each other more than we realized." Sarah looked at him, her eyes softening. "Maybe so," she whispered. They returned inside, where Emily was waiting with hot cocoa. The three of them sat together again, as if they had always been a family. Emily leaned against Sarah, yawning sleepily. Sarah wrapped an arm around her without thinking, her motherly instincts returning naturally. Daniel watched quietly, and the sight filled his heart with a deep warmth. As the day went on, Sarah began to relax more. She laughed at Emily's jokes, helped set the table for dinner, and even sang softly when Christmas carols played in the background. She was no longer the woman searching through trash in the cold. For the first time in years, she was part of something bigger: a home, a family, even if only for a short time. But deep inside, Sarah still carried doubts. She wondered how long this kindness would last. Would Daniel grow tired of her presence? Would people convince him she didn't belong in his world? She didn't want to be a burden. Yet as she looked at Emily's trusting eyes and Daniel's steady kindness, she allowed herself for just this one day to believe that maybe life could change for the better. That night, after Emily went to bed, Sarah sat quietly by the fireplace while Daniel placed another log on the fire. The room glowed softly. "This has been the most beautiful Christmas I've had in years," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I don't know how to thank you." Daniel sat across from her, looking thoughtful. "Sarah, you don't need to thank me. Just promise me one thing: don't give up on yourself. You still have so much life ahead of you. You still matter." Her eyes filled with tears again, but this time they weren't tears of sadness, they were tears of hope. She nodded slowly. "I'll try," she whispered. The fire crackled, the snow fell quietly outside, and inside that mansion, three people who had been broken in different ways began to heal together. What had started as a chance encounter on a cold Christmas Eve was slowly becoming something much more powerful, a reminder that compassion could rebuild even the most shattered hearts. And as Sarah closed her eyes that night, lying under warm blankets, she carried with her a new thought: maybe this wasn't just a temporary kindness. Maybe it was the beginning of a second chance. The next morning was calm, the snow outside glittering under the soft winter sun. Sarah woke up slowly, her body sinking into the warmth of the soft bed. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming. The warmth, the quiet, the smell of coffee drifting through the air, it was so far from the harsh streets and cold nights she had become used to. But when she opened her eyes and saw the neat guest room, she realized it was real. She was safe, and she was not alone. She sat at the edge of the bed, holding the blue scarf that Daniel had given her the day before. She pressed it against her chest, feeling a strange sense of comfort. It wasn't just a piece of cloth, it was proof that someone saw her, someone cared enough to remind her she mattered. For years, she had walked past people who looked away from her, who pretended she didn't exist. And now, here was a man and his little girl treating her as if she was part of their lives. When she walked into the kitchen, she found Daniel making breakfast while Emily sat at the counter coloring with her crayons. The smell of pancakes and syrup filled the air. Emily looked up and grinned. "Good morning, Sarah," she chirped. Sarah's lips trembled into a smile. "Good morning, sweetheart." Daniel turned and smiled warmly. "You slept well?" Sarah nodded. "Better than I have in years." Her voice was soft, almost shy. They ate breakfast together, and the simple act of sitting at a table, eating warm food, and sharing laughter felt almost magical to Sarah. She found herself telling Emily little stories from her past about how she used to bake cookies with her daughter, how she would read fairy tales before bed, and how they used to decorate their own small Christmas tree. Emily listened with wide eyes, asking questions and giggling at the funny parts. Daniel watched quietly, moved by the way Sarah was opening up. He could see how much she had carried inside her, how much she had lost, yet how much love was still in her heart. After breakfast, Sarah helped Daniel clean the kitchen. She felt awkward at first, but he didn't let her feel like a guest. He treated her as though she belonged, giving her small tasks, listening when she spoke, and including her in everything. For Sarah, it was healing. It was as if the pieces of her broken life were being gently put back together. Later in the afternoon, Daniel decided to take Emily to visit the local church service. He asked Sarah if she wanted to join, and though she hesitated, she agreed. When they walked into the church, Sarah's heart felt heavy with memories. She hadn't stepped into a church in years. She remembered lighting candles with her daughter, praying for her health, and crying quietly when those prayers seemed unanswered. But sitting between Daniel and Emily, she didn't feel alone. She listened to the choir singing carols, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel bitterness. Instead, she felt peace. The words of kindness, hope, and forgiveness wrapped around her like a warm blanket. After the service, as they walked back to the car, Sarah whispered to Daniel, "I never thought I'd feel this again. Belonging. Peace. Thank you for reminding me." Daniel looked at her seriously. "Sarah, you've reminded me too. Reminded me what Christmas is really about." Back at the house, the day grew quiet. Snow continued to fall outside, and Emily sat by the fire playing with her toys. Daniel and Sarah sat across from each other, talking softly. Sarah spoke about how difficult it was on the streets, how people often judged without knowing the story. Sometimes, she said with a shaky voice, a smile from a stranger would have meant the world to me. But instead, people looked away. They didn't want to see me. They didn't want to know my pain. Daniel listened carefully. "That's why what you said last night will stay with me forever," he said gently. Sarah tilted her head, curious. "What did I say?" "You said, I once had everything too." Those words opened my eyes. They reminded me that none of us are safe from losing it all. And they reminded me to never take what I have for granted. Sarah lowered her eyes, touched deeply. She hadn't realized how powerful her words had been to him. There was a pause, then Daniel leaned forward. "Sarah, I don't know what tomorrow holds. But if you're willing, I'd like to help you start over. Not as charity, but as a friend who believes in you." Her breath caught. "Start over?" she asked softly. Daniel nodded. "I can help you find a place to stay, help you get back on your feet. And until then, you're welcome here. Emily already adores you, and I think we both feel that you belong here, even if just for now." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. She had dreamed of such words but never believed she would hear them. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say yes," Daniel said kindly. She smiled through her tears and nodded. "Yes." Emily, hearing part of the conversation, clapped her hands with joy. "Yay! That means Sarah stays with us." The room filled with laughter, and in that moment, Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in years: hope for tomorrow. That night, before bed, Sarah sat by the window in the guest room, looking out at the falling snow. She thought about her daughter, about the life she had lost, and about the pain she had endured. But for the first time, she also thought about the future, not with fear, but with a small, glowing hope. She whispered softly into the night, "Thank you." Downstairs, Daniel tucked Emily into bed. She hugged him and said, "Daddy, this was the best Christmas ever." Daniel smiled, kissing her forehead. "Yes, it was." Later, as he sat alone by the fireplace, Daniel thought about the strange turn his Christmas Eve had taken. He had gone out feeling empty and lonely, and he had come back with something priceless: a reminder that compassion could change lives. He realized that in helping Sarah, he had also healed a part of himself. For Sarah, Christmas had begun with hunger, cold, and despair. But it ended with warmth, kindness, and the promise of a new beginning. And for Daniel and Emily, it became the Christmas they would never forget, not because of the gifts or the decorations, but because they opened their hearts to someone in need. What Sarah said that night stayed with Daniel forever: "You've given me more than food or shelter, you reminded me that I still matter." It was a sentence that carried the true spirit of Christmas. A reminder that kindness, no matter how small, could restore dignity, heal wounds, and create miracles. And so, the story of a millionaire single dad, his little girl, and a homeless woman who had lost everything became more than just a holiday memory. It became a lesson that compassion has the power to rebuild lives, and that sometimes, the greatest gifts are not wrapped under the tree, but found in the hearts of those who choose to care.